give it a second so that we make sure we're actually live. Hi, Anita.
Hey, Anita.
Hey, friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today I am so excited to be joined by my friend and author of the Drowned Kingdom series saga.
Saga.
Love it. Okay, so Drowned Kingdom saga, and we're going to be talking about his first book, Drowned Kingdom, which I just finished here in the month of March. Very excited to ask all the questions. PL, thank you so much for agreeing kind of last minute to be on my channel for this interview. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so honored to be here. I'm so excited when you actually, I'm so honored that you asked me to come back on your channel. So I'm just happy to be here.
Oh, absolutely. Congrats on the audiobook release. Yes, thank you, Anita.
Oh, congratulations. Yes, on the audiobook release.
Birdie says hi.
Oh, hey, Birdie. She's awesome.
Anita says hi. Troy says
hey,
hi.
Troy
Hey,
Knowlton,
everybody.
another great author, Troy Knowlton.
Yep, Seekers. Go check out Seekers.
Yep,
Shout out.
Great book, Seekers. Yep. Good
okay, stuff. To start out, PL, for those who haven't read Drowned Kingdom yet, can you give us kind of a brief synopsis of what it's about?
Okay, well, Drowned Kingdom and the series is partially based on my version of the tale of Atlantis, the lost world of Atlantis. No big spoiler there that if you follow Plato's famous fable, it's about an island that sinks, to make it really short and sweet, a famous island that sinks with a peerless civilization that sinks beneath the waves. So I've done a version of that with my Drowned Kingdom series. I've added some twists that I hope are somewhat inventive, and it doesn't follow Plato's tale exactly, of course, but I think I've hopefully captured a lot of the big elements in his famous tale. And it's about a prince. He is the second in line to the throne of Atlantis. Well, my version of Atlantis, which I call Atlantics, not too inventive there, but that's there's reasons for that. So he finds himself leading the last remnants of his people across the sea to a new continent where he plans to become essentially the master, impose his will, subjugate, conquer, reassert the dominance that the sunken Atlantics had prior to it vanishing beneath the waves. Just to add to that, the Atlantics of my book and series, it's this colonial power, superpower. Their military might is backed primarily through their naval supremacy and their superior armament and arms and training. And they've been a dominant power for 500 years in the area that they've been. And they see themselves as essentially the peerless, society in the known world. They're also extremely, generally speaking, they are bigoted, prejudiced against other societies. And they have a monotheistic religion where they worship a single God. They believe that they have a divine right to impose their religion on others. So when Arthur comes to this continent, in his mind, he's going to take it over eventually, impose his religion, suppress all the religions that he believes are heathens and idolaters and heretics, and he's going to take over everything and be the Lord of all. The different cultures there and races, they aren't really down with that. They have their own religions and faiths, what he would consider, again, a pagan. They worship things such as, in one part, elemental goddesses, and they have mages that they believe wield the power of these elemental goddesses. And they have quite a few, pretty redoubtable warlords that are pretty badass fighters and rulers of their own. And they have no intention of having Othrin come there and impose his will. So it's going to be about these kind of conflicts, clashes of cultures, Othrin's striving to survive, much less thrive, and assert himself and reestablish this new foothold. And, we'll see if he survives to fulfill his dream of dominating the continent or not.
Well, that's a pretty decent pitch.
Oh, thank you.
So there's a couple more people jumping on. I wanted to make sure I said hello. Mike says, just left a review for Drowned Kingdom today on Audible.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that.
Fantasy Thinker, hello.
Fantasy Thinker, how's it going? yeah, orange, horrible. Thanks, Troy.
It's funny. I won't say more than this because for anybody watching who isn't sure, and I should probably put up a spoiler-free-ish banner for everyone to make sure, but Hurt is one of my favorite characters from the story. And I don't know if that's a normal reaction or not, but he's a great character. I really liked him a lot.
He actually is one of a lot of people's favorite character because he's, without spoilers, he's somewhat of a contemporary to Othrin. Yet,
Mm-hmm.
For all the issues that Hurt faces, some of which are far more serious than Othrin, and having a bit of that dysfunctional family background, Hurt still has a nobility, a natural nobility, and a grace, and an empathy that I think Othrin finds himself
Struggles with.
drawn to. That Othrin struggles to, but
Yeah.
finds himself drawn to. And I think as they grow to know each other, they realize they have a lot in common
Yeah.
in the way they approach leadership. And but Othran admires her very much, and the feelings mutual. And
Yeah.
they essentially out of a very crazy situation establish a friendship. So.
Yeah. That was, I think, one of my favorite parts of the story as a whole, because I really liked Hurt's character, and what you did with him in his story arc during the first book was really cool. So, not to get too off track, but wanted to mention that since Horror the Horrible came up. So with this book specifically, because this is your debut novel, every story has some kind of little nugget somewhere where you're sitting in a restaurant or something, and all of a sudden you have this, what would be a really cool story? So where was the nugget that sparked this entire saga?
That's a great question. I would say that, well, this novel was years in inception.
Yeah.
It started off as this mammoth, gargantuan, big binder size, like over 1,000-page thing that I decided, well, no one's going to read that from a debut novelist and a novelist that no one knows. So why don't I chop this up into a series, like 7 books? And that's what happened. But the real moment was, I think I want to kind of split into 3 parts. One, I always want to write a fantasy book, so I kind of ruminated over it over the years. I didn't have time to do it when I was younger. I didn't have the headspace. I felt I wasn't good enough. I didn't have a life experience. And then I started getting back into fantasy after a kind of long absence. I was more reading thrillers and police procedurals and things like that. And then I started reading fantasy, and I specifically read, I have to give him a shout out, I specifically read Trader's Sun Cycle by Miles / Christian Cameron, who is now, oddly enough, a friend that I
love this community.
Yeah, he's an amazing person, and a great writer. So I read that book, and I was like, I want to write a fantasy book that is so immersive the way his is, down to the tiniest detail, that I want to be able to look back and say, if someone reads this 100 years from now, it's still timely, and they can still immerse themselves in it. So I think that was really a big inspiration for me in terms of writing this series. I guess the other thing is that I sat down and I said, at one point, that I want to write something that was inspired by Atlantis, because I was so, of all the things I could pick, Atlantis is one of those things that it's fascinated me, and it just astounds me that right now there's people out there looking for this place that may have never existed, but thousands of people believe it does, millions probably, and they're still looking for it, and it's essentially a fable, a legend.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself always just really struck me. So I want to write my version of that.
Yeah.
And I also realized that I reached a point in my life where I was confounded by some of the themes that I deal with my book, like racism, homophobia, misogyny, religious intolerance. Those things, I was in a headspace where I kept thinking about all these things, and I wanted to say something about them. Not that obviously I'm not smart enough to have answers to solve these world problems that are perplexing our world, and have for decades or centuries. I just wanted to write something in reaction to that.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, wouldn't it be neat if somehow I could write it from the perspective of a person who held those type of views, and what it would look like from the inside. And then, could someone like that change? And when I say change, like, to what degree would they change? Like, totally just, do an about face in terms of a different person? Would they change by degrees? Would it be incremental? How much would they change? How much would the change matter in the grand scheme of things? Who would they impact if they changed? And what would be the obstacles to them changing, the barriers?
Yep.
Those are all things that I really, in sitting down looking at things that really matter to me. I said, you know what? So I want to incorporate kind of all those things, and that's what happened.
Yeah. So a lot of people, we talk a lot about, some people start with a character, some people start with kind of a general plot, some people start with, a magic system or concept like that. And then it sounds like you kind of had the themes and that kind of inspiration of, okay, what if Atlantis, but fantasy, and then here's the themes that I want to pack into that. And
Yeah.
Othran was kind of came out of those themes. Is
Yeah,
that fair to
Othran.
say?
No, that's excellent, Tori. You're exactly right. So Othran was an amalgam of different people I've met in my life personally, different people I've heard about from other people firsthand. Well, I guess not really firsthand, but different figures, historical figures. All sorts of people wrapped up into Othran, and some of the sadly horrific things and abhorrent things that he says and thinks. There are things that I've either heard myself, I've heard other people say on television, news, radio, media, etc., social media. I've heard that, I've read historically, have said. So it's something that, and his thought processes, his thinking, and his unique view of the world. I wanted to make an ancient leader that, what would an ancient leader think? What would his, because when we look at especially historical figures, rulers, let's just say kings, because talk about the male, the patriarchy here in especially in, so let's look at the medieval period, for example, right? We tend to lionize and idolize these figures. Henry V was this great king. Why was he a great king? Because he conquered France and he was a great warrior. He's a great soldier and he won all these battles. And tragically, he died young. He got sick, but he won France and he was the greatest king. Well, what did he think about other races? What was his policy towards women? And of course, that would be governed by the value system of the time and his values and what the value system was of that era. But as well, like, what would someone like that think? Based on their upbringing, based on the privilege which they were raised, based on their environment, based on so many other things, their exposure to other races. Like, it's a very complex question. So taking someone, for example, I'm picking on Henry V now, it's easy to look at him at from the lens of all his battles, the Siege of Harfleur and Agincourt and, but what was the guy like? What did he think about this? What do you think about that? Like, those are things. And of course, there's documented, there is some documented evidence about some of those things. But when people think about him, they think about X. Right. Well, I want to pull back the curtain in terms of what would someone like him really be thinking about this?
Yeah. Well, it kind of, oftentimes I think we look at historical figures, like you're saying, as a kind of one-dimensional. Like, they're known for this one thing, or even some of them, like you said, a battle or a specific time period. And what's the rest of that? Like, they had a whole life and a lot of other things about them. So why are we, we only get this kind of, which of course, when you go that far back in history, it is harder to get a more, 360 view of that. But that kind of leads into my next question, because Othran is, like you said, he's a very bold choice as a protagonist. And not only do you choose him as your protagonist, he's in first person and he is the only POV through the entire story. So what was the decision? Like, you could have gone so many different ways with that. You could have had multiple POVs. You could have had, what have you, with Othran and other characters. So what was why Othran, and why, like, just Othran?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Tori. There's a lot of reasons for that, multiple layers for that. Number one, I thought Othran in himself was a fascinating character. I thought he was someone who, you'd be like, you'd be so upset with him sometimes, and sometimes you'd have empathy for him, and sometimes you'd be puzzled and perplexed by the way he thinks, and sometimes you understand, and you'd find yourself thinking about, well, how would I really think if I was in his shoes? What would I really do? And perhaps even have sympathy for some of the situations he finds himself in that in some ways are pretty impossible to deal with. Yeah. I also wanted people to understand that, the face of all these issues, racism, homophobia, misogyny things, it's not something that, for me and what I want to write about, I didn't want people to necessarily be able to look away from it, because from a first person perspective, you're in the person's head, and if they feel that way, there's no avoiding it. There's no misinterpretation of who and what Othran is, what he represents, and the way he thinks, and how that affects others. And I didn't want people to be able to look away from that the way you can from a more omnipotent, kind of removed perspective. Also wanted you to understand deeply Othran's feelings and thoughts in terms of if someone says, if someone writes a book, say third person, it's like, Tori really hurt, really, was really in pain about this. It's different when in the one the page that I was really hurt about this.
Yeah.
It feels different. It sounds different. There's a different reaction, a lot more visceral. We talked a bit before we came about things being more visceral. I wanted it to be visceral. And I wanted people to explore based on that. I thought it would trigger more of the, what do I really think about this? What do because this person's like talking to me, basically. How do I really feel about that? And probably I could go on, but I think the last point I want to make is Othran, as a first person narrator, it's an unreliable perspective. And
just a little bit.
and I wanted the reader to eventually relish this unrivaled narrative from this person who obviously is flawed and has a lot of controversial and flawed opinions. But as the series goes on, you sprinkle in another POV, perhaps first person. You sprinkle in a little third person here and there to give you a bit of a more well-rounded view of what's actually happening. But there's things I didn't want the reader to see specifically from that omnipotent perspective. I wanted to be focused on Othran. But as the series progresses, you'll get more and more snippets that you start to understand what's really going on.
Sure.
Because Othran is insulated not only in his views, but actually in his understanding of what's really going on here. So I wanted that. So in the next book, The Last Atlanteans, there is, I introduced my first person POV that is not Othran.
Okay.
It's another character in the book. And then in the third book, right away, you get a third kind of omnipotent, and then you get sprinkles of that through that third book. And, and then it just continues from there. But Othran will always be the focus. He'll always have the lion's share of the first person POV book.
Sure.
But you will see staged a bit more coming as we go through the series.
I just think that's really cool, because I think as writers, sometimes we get so caught in a box of okay, I'm writing a first person book right now, or a third person book. And I love that you're kind of utilizing those different narrative tools to say, well, okay, this is a first person narrative, and then I'm expanding a little bit, and I'm putting I think that's a really cool way to utilize those and not get kind of trapped in, well, I now that I started with a first person Othran, that's all we're getting for So I think that's really cool.
Well, thanks. It's a risk because, with Othran, he's someone most people would initially detest, perhaps. So a lot of people might be like, I can't read a whole book of this guy. But at the same time, I'd like to think he's compelling enough. And he's complicated enough and he's interesting enough that eventually that becomes a secondary thing, that he's not maybe the hero that you want. But you realize that, the fact that he is what someone described it really aptly one day, he's the protagonist. He thinks he's the protagonist of the story, but he may potentially be the antagonist. Right. I thought that in itself was unique.
Yeah.
I'm sure people have done it before, but I thought that in itself was somewhat unique to high epic fantasy
for sure
type. So
yeah, well, and I think too, one of the things, at least for me as a reader, that it accomplished was oftentimes when we tackle these really big themes, even in our own head or sometimes narrative can kind of dehumanize it. And I think having that first person narrative forces us to continue, the humanity never leaves, it's still there, and we can see the inner struggle, and we can see the questions and the all of the things that are happening throughout the book. And like you said, we can't look away from it, and we're still focused on, okay, but I can't put Othran off to the side like that, because I'm experiencing this through his eyes.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the issue, I believe, with confronting those themes is what happens to us in life is that, and it's totally understandable, we don't always want to face oppression, religious intolerance, race. There's so much of it around us. You deal with it perhaps in your day-to-day life. It's not something necessarily you want to read about. So, and when you're stuck in the head of someone who feels that way for 400 odd pages, for some people that's a non-starter. Now, some people as well have told me that despite that's how they feel in journal literature, they look for more the escape and all that. They found they're able to focus on like the world building and the lore and the battle scenes, although they're not a lot of this book, but there are some. They're able to focus on the traditional fantasy elements and just kind of put the rest almost to the side.
Yeah.
Right. And just kind of read it and enjoy it and then go back and kind of like, okay, you know what? I understand why PL wrote these things in here and it was compelling. Maybe it's something that, I just have to keep reading. And the more I read that, some people said, well, the more I read through, I went on to book 2, for example, was like, oh, okay. And they start to get used to it. Right. So.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there's a couple things in here that I wanted to point out. Daniel says there are times you can't really get a handle on the secondary characters, which would normally be a sign of problems with the writing, but it's because you can't trust Othrin's opinion of them. Yeah, there were so many times when Othrin and I had different opinions about the people he was meeting. I was like, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree there, Othrin.
Yeah, exactly.
Othrin, Lana says, Othrin is definitely complicated. I think about this series so much. This definitely,
thanks so much, Lana.
I kind of said that previous to us going live, just that it's one of those books that really kind of made me slow down because, like I said, I was kind of breaknecking my way through March reads and having a great time. But then I was like, you know what? I feel like I need like something different. I need a little bit of a switch up. And Drowned Kingdom really, I slowed down. I took my time with it because there's just so many things to think about and percolate on through the story. And that kind of goes into the next question I had for you, which was about the world building. And first of all, like I'm just blown away by the amount of work that you as the author put into the detail of this world. This literally reads like a historical narrative, and it feels like it's a place that actually existed with people that you would have found in the history books, people that, like it just, there was so much there. I'm so impressed by that, I have to say. There were several times in the book where I actually closed it and put it down for a second, and I was just like, I'm just, wow. Like every time you pull off another layer and there's more there and you have the history of all of it's just amazing. So I'm geeking out about it just a little for a second. But the amount of it, like, where do you even start with building a world to that depth? Where do you start? How do you keep it all straight as you're writing?
Well, thank you so much for the kind words, Tori. Like anyone else, I have outlines, and I think a lot of writers, especially writing this kind of fantasy, you have outlines. Like I have family trees and chronologies and dates of birth and death and significant events and maps and glossaries of each country, that this is simple, like this is the capital, these are the people who inhabit it, this is the language they speak, like, and but those are things that I typically have to refer to a lot, to be honest with you. I'm crazy, I keep a lot of stuff in my head. But the thing that people need to understand about the Drowned Kingdom is that it's part of a 7-book series,
right?
And then after that there's going to be 2 prequel trilogies where I take you back to 2 of Othrin's ancestors who he happens to idolize. And you'll learn that they aren't quite exactly the way Othrin envisioned them in real life, because obviously they lived hundreds of years before he was born, and all of his beliefs about them are pretty well erroneous. And so I actually have that history going backwards. Like for obviously reading Drowned Kingdom, so you're hearing all this stuff about the past, but that kind of story is already written, so it's easy to project now in the future and write future events. Also have a subsequent 7-book series that will follow. I'll write the Drowned Kingdom saga, God willing, then write 2 separate prequel trilogies, one which will take place approximately 300-ish years before Othrin was born, and one will take place about 500-ish years before he was born. And then I'll move forward and write a subsequent 7-book trilogy that will pick up where the Drowned Kingdom series ends, to finish like essentially the entirety of the story. Right, so there's a lot planned. So I've had to map this out.
Yeah,
and I'm somewhat I'm somewhat obsessive as a planner. I
You
will
have to
admit
be.
I'm crazy. Like, I know my friends call me crazy. My fellow writers like Tim Hardy, Holly Tinsley, Bjorn Larson, a lot of my friends are like, I cannot believe that. Like, I have all the titles of my books planned out. I have all the cover, the back cover blurbs written. I have
Wow.
I have all the cover designs already schemed out. I have, like, everything is planned out for the most part, down to the last detail. So that's the kind of detail that I have supporting me, which makes
Yeah.
it very easy to write
Yeah.
that level of detail in the actual books. So.
Yeah. Well, I imagine too, like I know for myself, once you just spend that much time in a world that you've created, it's kind of you're so immersed in it that a lot of that stuff is just kind of, oh yeah. And this is, you probably have Author's family tree memorized.
Which is crazy again, but as a writer, that's how we are. And on top of that, but I do want to say that as much as it seems maybe inflexible,
Mm,
I have the guts of this thing written out, as I said, but
sure.
there is a lot of room for, I mean, there's characters, I'm sure you've experienced yourself. There's characters that were supposed to be minor and they just scream for age. They're like, let me in, I need more book page time. And I'm like, okay, well,
All right.
you deserve it. And then I wrote them in, they played a large role in the story. So
Yep.
in as much as essentially the story is written and the path I'm taking is pretty decided, there will be room for some
Some
tweaking and
discovery.
some things to happen that perhaps not so much up to about book 5 or 6,
Okay.
perhaps in book 7, still toiling with a few ideas, but it's pretty well set in stone now, but that wasn't all the case. Like, when I was in book 1, I thought some things weren't going to happen in book 4, which I'm right now, which is entitled Lion's Pride, that weren't necessarily part of, but now they're definitely on, and I think it's really made the story better. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah. 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 That's it. I think it's funny. It's always fun to me to hear how different writers approach their series, because I know quite a few writers who have, and there's a prequel series, and that's, as fantasy writers, we tend to do that thing where we're like, I'm going to write a book, and then it suddenly becomes, a 10-book series or a 14-book series with prequels or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm very much a discovery writer, so I'm always just fascinated by people who plan out that much in advance. I have 3 books mostly planned, and I feel like that's a lot for me. So I'm just very impressed by that. So
Thank you.
do you have like is it all on your computer? Do you have like a reference book? I know sometimes they use a binder. Like, do you have a reference book you can reach to?
Yeah, I have both.
Nice.
But again, I would only refer those things. Like you said, it's all in my head. So
Yeah.
I don't refer those things if looking for a very specific date that I needed
Sure.
to make sure that I had integrity with this plot because this person couldn't have been born at this time because, you know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of, like, I'm doing my own research. Like,
Yeah.
but the rest of it it's in my head.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily need to refer to it. And it's really fun to know that one of the most fun things about writing a book like this, and like I said, and you hit the nail on the head, I really want it to sound like it's a historical chronicle, and as if Othman's looking back and recounting, by the fireside, his infamous or notorious deeds, to some scribe or something, assuming he lives long enough to do that, So I wanted that feeling, but yeah, like the coolest part is when Author talks about historical figures, when he talks about his heroes, and knowing that they're going to be so different, and that I can't wait to share what they really are like and what they really went through, and what their relation to the story, the bigger overarching story is that Author has no idea and doesn't understand yet. I cannot wait to get, you never try to look too far ahead. I'm learning to enjoy book to book.
Yep.
But the one thing I said in the acknowledgments in Lord and King, which is the 3rd book about to be released April 28th and May 5th. April 28th,
Congratulations.
pre-order. Thank you. And May 5th for Amazon. I realized, wow, I thought this is going to take forever. I'm writing a 7-book series. I'm already on book 4. Like, time's really flying, right?
Yeah.
So I'm learning to enjoy the ride more than just keep looking ahead. But that's part of my nature. But I cannot wait, though. I want to write the Dragon King saga. I want to write it well, but I also am really excited about when it's done to take you back in these prequel trilogies and meet these 2 fascinating, what I think will be fascinating characters and the characters that surround them in the prequels. So
yeah, that's awesome. I know that's there's that meme that goes around Twitter so often about the like my work in progress and then the shiny new project, and we're like, oh, it's so true.
It is.
It's very hard to stay on task when you have that other story is still in there and needs to be told. So, out of all of the world building pieces, what do you find is your favorite to really dig into? Is it the historical kind of side of things? Is it the cultures? Is it the world, like the environment building? Because you do a lot of description about the different places that they're going through. What's your favorite bit?
I love. I think I don't remember what exactly the quote that George R. Martin, one of my favorite authors, said about A Song of Ice and Fire. It was something about basically it's all about these little small conversations. These little like almost like fireside chats when someone's giving you that nugget of something you didn't know that ends up being really impactful. And those are my favorite scenes to write. Especially when it's someone who actually seems to have some wisdom and something to relay that Authren hasn't even thought about. Authren has characters in the book, for example, Glathan, who is very wise,
Yes.
and he's a lot of people's favorite character as well. He's very wise, he's very noble, he's very open-minded, he's very tolerant, he's well-traveled, he's got a lot of experience that Authren lacks in many ways, and he's Authren's essentially one of his best friends and closest advisors. And when he and Authren sit down or when they talk about something, or when Glathan imparts a perspective that Authren wasn't thinking about, or says something comforting to him, and soothes his troubles, or presents him with an argument that might sway him to really think differently about something he needs to think differently about, and that you'll only see more of that as the series goes on. Those are really, really cool moments, and also because they're family and they're cousins, and like they have a very unique relationship, and I really enjoy those moments the most, right? When it comes to and you can certainly about world building. There's a scene where Authren speaks to Gogist, who is a high priest, and Gogist imparts some information about. Gogist is somewhat of he's a very progressive, forward-thinking religious figure. He's not merely focused on the hard line, somewhat more radical aspects of he looks at things differently. When he imparts some knowledge on Authren's kind of like he looks at him as like you're supposed to be the leader of the church. Like, why are you so open-minded about this? Well, he tells him, because I've read, I've learned, I understand the way things really work, and maybe things aren't exactly the way you see it. In a nice way, he says that because Authren's his overlord, but he's very careful, but he's very subtle, but yet direct. He's subtle but yet direct about the information, and I love those moments. And when that conveys a bit more about the world, because in those conversations you learn a lot about the world, what the customs are, how people think. Those are things that really, really I enjoy conveying.
Yeah, those kind of moments of normalcy in between all of the big things. Yeah. So do you, I know this is like asking for a favorite child, but do you have a favorite character in your series? Have we met them yet?
I have several. I would say Lacey is definitely one of my favorite characters. Her role is absolutely critical in the series.
Sure.
And it doesn't seem like that now, but you'll see as time goes on. And she is, what I love the most about her is, in the first book, people may believe that, there's an absence of strong female characters, and a lot of them are stereotypes, et cetera, et cetera. As the series progresses, you realize that it's actually to the contrary, that women essentially are what makes the Drowned Kingdom saga tick. But in the beginning, what you see is Authren's very misogynistic, sexist view of what women are, and his belief of what they do and how they're acting, what they're supposed to be. And Lyce is the first character that really, truly shakes up that view that he has, right? And is so opposite to what he believes a woman should be, but he can't help, believe that she's compelling, and she calls him out without, very candidly on his issues. She calls him out, and she's like a counter to Leslie. And they actually are very similar. They think the same in a lot of ways, but yet they're so different. And she forces him to acknowledge that perhaps he needs to really look closely at some of those beliefs for these very pragmatic reasons, right? And she's a staunchly she's a staunch believer in her religion and her faith, what she considers her faith, that author considers heresy, as he is in his. And she continually through the series points out what some of the issues are from her perspective with author and how he thinks and his religion, etc. So and that's I love that back and forth. And some of their arguments essentially and their debates get really interesting for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. That kind of one of the things that I wanted to ask that kind of goes back to you talking about how you've planned out your series and how the Drowned Kingdom came out in 2021. Yes. Okay. So between then and now you're working on book 4. How has your writing process, if at all, changed? Like what have you learned? What would you giving advice to PL starting to work on a Drowned Kingdom? Like, has anything changed for you in the process?
Well, I hope, because like all writers' story, I'm sure you're the same. We all will looking for continuous improvement. We're all looking to get better as a writer. My goal has always been that each book that you read from me, I like to say, wow, A Drowned Kingdom was a good book. Oh, the last set of things is even better. Oh, Lord and Kings is even better. Oh, wow, Alliance Pride is amazing, and so on and so on and so on. And I think part of what I've done is I want to start out really simple, as I kind of inferred before, in terms of how I approached writing the book. It was a lot more. It was first person exclusively. There's a bit of a time jump here and there, but really and truly, it's a pretty linear book in a lot of ways. It starts off here and it talks about what happened, and then we get to here, and then we move forward. As I grew in confidence as a writer, more confidence with writing those more omnipotent perspectives, more confidence in writing multiple first-person perspectives in a book, more confidence with playing with a lot of features of literature, then you start doing that. So I think that's what's changed in my writing process. I've got more confident. I feel more skilled, not that I'm skilled per se, but I feel more skilled than I was before and be able to attack certain things head on. And I'm learning my strengths more. Before we got on the show, I talked a bit about, like, I thought, for example, like, no one was ever going to really applaud me for my battle scenes. I tried to make them well done, but that, for whatever reasons, has become something that people seem to really enjoy about my books as they progress. And Drowned Kingdom doesn't have many battle scenes, but the ones that it has, I hope are decent.
They're intense.
But they get a lot more intense in the second book, and everything gets ramped up times 2, 3 as the series goes on. So I'm learning that is a strength, and it's not something that I'm just going to gratuitously throw in there. But at the same time, I spend more time in making sure that is part of the writing that readers enjoy in my books. And I've maybe enhanced some of the battle scenes where I would have maybe not done before. Because I also thought, for example, I thought world building might be a strength because I thought, something that I really worked hard on. But now that I realize that battle scenes are also something people enjoy, we want to write our books the way we want to write them. But there is a certain element, I think, for most writers that when you're writing to market to a certain degree, you're writing to the people that your audience that say, hey, I really, really like this. Okay, well, give the people what they want, right? And within the parameters of writing your book. Yeah. I think I'm also better too at confidence in general, in terms of, like, you write your first books and you're so scared to, you're so anxious to get out there, you're so scared what people are going to think, and you're like, oh my God, like, it's like your kid, you send them off to school, and it's like, people are going to like them, and but everybody's, they're so wonderful, and then you get your first good review, and you're like, and you get your first bad review, you're like, oh my gosh, it's crushing, and then you learn to ride the waves a lot better, and ride that wave between taking constructive criticism and using it if it's potentially valuable, and then perhaps ignoring some things that maybe aren't as constructive, and not being tone deaf to your readership, but still writing the book you want, like writing that line in terms of like, if you hear continual feedback about one aspect of writing that's perhaps negative, you kind of, okay, maybe that's something I need to address. Or if you're getting feedback that something's really, really positive, well, build on that. Do you know what I mean? So
absolutely.
You can't do that after book 1. You can't, because you don't have the data, right, to support it. But after book 2 and the book 3, you really start to, get that data that you can accumulate and analyze and use to make you a better writer. So I think that's another reason hopefully my writing is improving as I go along. So if I'm doing my job, for most people, and the consensus so far seems to be that, book one is a good book, and book two is even better, and book three is better. And if I can keep that up for some books, I don't know if I can keep that up, but if people can feel a little bit that way, then I've done my job.
Right. So, I mean, I know I had you in the, you were gracious enough to send me a clip for the Dear Writer video a little while ago. And I didn't know if you wanted to, because as we're kind of talking about your debut novel and you're kind of into it and you've gained a lot of this experience as you're getting into book 4, for somebody who is a new writer who's watching the interview, like what would you tell them? What would you tell a new writer about, here's some advice that, I want to give to somebody who might be starting out their first debut novel?
I'm not one per se to give advice, because who am I? But at the same time, Tori, as as a writer, like you're a successful novelist, and that is because you've written a book and published it, and it all starts there. And I think the hardest thing about doing it is writing the damn book, publishing it, and finding whatever means you can to write that book, get it edited, get it published, get it out there. That is the starting of everything. And I think now that I'm looking back, now that I have a bit more experience, I'm realizing that it's all about your body of work. It's all about, frankly, like for some people, writing that one book in their lifetime that they want to get published is it. And that's great. And that's fantastic. And if that makes you happy, that's amazing. And, be proud, celebrate. For some people, they want that body of work to look back over a 20, 30-year writing career and have 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 books. And that's more me. I started very late in life. And when you publish in your 50s, you're very cognizant that, you have more years behind you than ahead. So if God bless me with a long life and I live into my 70s and 80s, even my 90s, I want to be able to look back, and as long as I have my faculties, keep writing as long as I can, and look back and say that I have 10, 15, 20, 30 books that, hopefully were well written, and that will withstand the test of time. And long after I'm gone, someone might pick it up and go, hey, this book's pretty good, right? So the main thing to get there, though, is to keep writing. Keep writing, keep writing, keep writing, keep publishing, keep publishing, keep publishing. Dust off that old project that you're like, but you know what, it's kind of interesting. Pick it up and say, maybe there's something here. And, when you run out of ideas, do that, right? If you're publishing a long series, even a trilogy or duology, stick with it, man. You get that second book. The second book is really hard. At least I found that way. Everybody has different experiences, but the second was really hard, man. Imposter syndrome just really bit me really hard. How do I make this book better than the first book, but keep everything that people liked and improve on that? And the people that thought it was great, well, maybe I'm going to be a one-hit wonder. The things that go, the things that go through your head are just like, oh, wow. But
you will give yourself every excuse to stop.
Yeah, struggle through it, because the stats say if you can get past book 2 or 3, you're going to keep writing. So get book 1 out, get to book 2 and keep going. Because the more you write, the more it will become something almost compulsive that you like, oh, well, I have to publish a book this year. Like, that's just, you know what I mean?
I can't stop.
I keep you in mind things like, things happen, mental health and pacing yourself and all those things. But I mean, if you're healthy, happy, motivated to write, and you want to write, and you can write, you can afford to publish, you can, however you're doing it, just keep going. I know it sounds cliche, don't give up, just persevere and just keep pumping those books up, because eventually, first of all, you get better. Second of all, you get more confident with getting better. And third, you're going to look back with pride that, wow, I look at my shelf and, there's 2 books up there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a third
almost
coming.
3.
Yeah. Like that's pretty exciting. Right?
Yeah.
And when I have 5, 6, 10, 15, 20, how am I going to feel then? And that sense of accomplishment, right? It's not just all about the finish line. Again, like, enjoy the process.
Yes.
There's some moments that aren't so great about writing. Everybody has their own thing. Like, for me, it's like editing is a slog, and you got to do a lot of rounds of it. But then there's a point where, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I missed that apostrophe. Oh my gosh, I'll look at this thing 15 times and I can't, but that's part of the process, right? Like, so get through those things and you will be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I wanted to make sure, like, I'm trying to get better about, sometimes we forget that there are people on the very beginning of this process that are watching this and might be like, wow, well, I don't have 3 books out, and be giving them a little bit of a, well, here's some advice from somebody who is doing very well and has 3rd book coming out, and like, you are definitely qualified to give advice, so thank you for doing that. I I'm trying to remember exactly how it's worded, but in the dedication of Drowned Kingdom, which is very sweet, for my
Thank you.
mother Carmen, the best writer in our family and the best mother a man could hope for, I love you with all my heart. I always love I read the dedications and the author's notes of every book I read. And I would love, if you're okay with that, to share more about that beautiful dedication and your mom as a writer and how she inspired you.
Well, my mother, hi mom, love you very much. If you watch this eventually, she's going to be 88 in a
Wow.
couple months. She is my inspiration in so many ways. Again, the best mother a man can ask for. That's how I feel. And I do love her with all my heart. And she was someone who didn't publish, however, wrote. So, in other words, um, it may be a bit before your time. You're fairly young, but if you remember those kind of like dime store in Canada, anyways, these dime store, you'd go into the grocery store and there'd be these Harlequin romance paperbacks sitting on like these racks, and you could just pick one up, and they're all like, there's 50 of them. The stories were largely, the plots were largely the same, and
Yep.
kind of like changed things, but they were quick, easy, entertaining stuff if you like romance, and that's kind of stuff she wrote. I thought hers were really good. She wrote several drafts and several different ones. She eventually submitted one to a publisher once. She got a rejection letter, and then that was it. She never said it again. Never. That was enough for her, and she just kept
Yeah.
writing there, just entertaining herself and entertaining us. And of course, I'm biased, but I thought she was brilliant. I thought she really
Yeah.
had talent. And the feedback, I saw the letter that she got from the editor that really was very encouraging. I was like, oh, you really have to listen. If you fix stuff like this, you really will be a published author. But she's like, no, that's enough. That one rejection letter was enough to knock her cold. And I understand and respect that. I wish
Sure.
that things would have been different and that she kept going. But one of the things that I'm most proud of is that she actually likes my books. I think generally likes my books, not just because she's my mom, and seems to love reading them. And she says she lives vicariously through me, watching
Oh,
me publish my book and actually have some semblance of a readership. So, she is one of my biggest fans. And true story, my lovely wife, Debbie, who another person I love with all my heart. Hey, sweetheart, I love you. She's my business manager. She's my partner extraordinaire. I was debating about whether to dedicate the first book to Debbie or my mom. And Debbie's like, you have to dedicate it to your mom. She's the one who bore you. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. If it wasn't for her and God Almighty, you wouldn't be here. You better. She goes, I'll take the second book. You can dedicate that one to me. But the first book,
yeah.
you want your mom to be alive to read that book in your
Yeah.
dedication. So she was right, of course, as she always is, and that's what I did. So my mom was didn't have a formal education really. She was one of many kids, 7, and but she's one of the most well-read, articulate people that I know, and she's read so widely. And she's definitely my inspiration in so many ways. But yeah, definitely my inspiration for writing, and hence why it was a no-brainer. Like I said, she was going to get book 1 or 2 to her regardless, and my wife encouraged me, and she's right that it was only fitting that my mom get book 1. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. I dedicate my books to all of my family members, my close family members. Book 1 is dedicated to my mom. Book 2 is dedicated to my lovely wife, Debbie, again. Book 3 is dedicated to my 2 daughters because it's a character that's kind of a composite of them, and so on. So, I'm picking those closest to me too. And I tend to write, I write, I won't say thinly disguised, but I write my family members and friends into my books. They
Yeah.
exist. Not exactly,
Yep.
complete, but I have characters that have a lot of their traits.
Yeah.
attributes, characteristics in there. So, which is kind of cool. And then they read, it's like, oh, like, oh,
Is that
what,
me?
yeah, that me? What am I, or what am I doing? When am I going to show up? Right?
Yep.
Oh, you're going to be there, and so.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Well, it's part of, the write what you know of, you can build such a more nuanced character when it's based upon somebody that's in your life that you've known for a long time. And yeah, I did the same thing in Phased. So I totally get it.
I can't read his face. It's on my shelf, and I'm hoping to get to it in April. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, it's such a cool, like, I love the dedication right away. I opened it, I was like, yep, this is like, those dedications are always so, I love seeing the people in our lives that have inspired us to take on I mean, this is a big project. Writing is a massive thing to take on. It's a very vulnerable art form. And like, I just really loved reading that dedication, and I definitely wanted to ask you about her because it was clear that it was somebody that had kind of put you on that path to where you are now.
And I appreciate that. And frankly, I'll quickly say, I was a bit worried to have my mom read this book. My mom is a very, very devoutly religious person, like extremely. Like religion, God is everything to her. That's where everything starts and stops. And I consider myself a lot more spiritual than formally religious. However, my mom is very devout, and I was concerned that, some of the themes and things I talked about, but she was totally, she's like, you handled them. One of my problems was, she said, you handle all that really well. The way you're looking at, especially, I talk about the difference between faith and religion, right? Yes. And that's a big theme in my books.
Yep.
And wondering if my mom would feel okay with how I dealt with that, which essentially, was much more about the way I wrote it, that, faith is something sacred. It's something, internal to us. And then religion, as much as it can be a force for good, can be a force to be used for not so good. And that's a struggle that we as humankind has gone through as well, that, it's different. It's hard to differentiate between the two. And that, we've needed religion throughout the centuries as this force for good that has done so much for humanity. Probably we wouldn't have existed had it not, at some points, were it not for formal organized religion. However, on the other side, these religions have committed, or in the name of these religions, I should say, some people have committed atrocities and has used it as a justification, excuse for total barbarism and horrific things that are unconscionable. So the struggle, I think, as especially someone of faith, I believe you are too, Tori, that you feel like you want to believe in your faith, and you want to be devout and staunch in your faith. You still want to appreciate the faith of others and respect them, and while not, criticizing them and finding them abhorrent, and realizing that while you feel your faith is your way, that someone else's faith is their way, and that it's not necessarily what's better, it's what's for you as opposed to what's for someone else. And then realizing that, of course, when it comes to religion and religious intolerance and persecution, that in itself produces an evil that, if you're someone who believes that, as a faith-based person, you should treat people a certain way, that's not consistent with the way people need to be treated. So,
right.
And also understanding that, many people have issues with other faiths because specifically of their treatment towards their faith. So those are all the kind of things that I talk about in my book. And I was kind of worried how my mom would, as open-minded, tolerant as she is, I was worried how she would, but I'm grateful
got
she
the
thought
mom's
it was
stamp of approval.
Yeah, she thought it was well done, right?
Nice.
Even though she said, like, Authorin's a right bastard, so, but she goes, but he's interesting. I'm like, well, thank you. That's a big compliment. So
right. Yeah, that's awesome. Kind of going along that same vein, if you were to choose not necessarily one thing, but something or some things that you would like your readers to take away from Drowned Kingdom, what would you say that is when they're finished, put the book down, or even the series? What do you want them to take away?
Well, there's a few things. I'd like them to take away that, Authren is representative of a lot of people that you probably have known, dealt with. Perhaps it's a coworker, a boss, even a friend, someone that is complex, but has these outward views that are extremely problematic, horrible, horrific, appalling, but yet that is not usually all there is to people like that. And that's the hardest thing to accept. Understanding is one thing, but accepting it is another. So you can have someone who, is outwardly terrible and is racist, overtly racist towards people, is bigoted, treats women terribly, does all these things, but yet they could be someone who, as a nominal member of society, if you didn't know that, you might say, oh, they seem like a decent person. They're funny, they're witty, they show up for work early every day, they stay late, they're a model employee, they're a model person in the community, they go to church, they help elderly ladies across the street, they pay their taxes, they're a good spouse, parent, friend, they do all these things, but yet, right? So what do you do with someone like that? Do you just reject it? Like, so, and I'm not necessarily saying what to do. I'm just saying that we have to understand that they're people too. So what, how you deal with them has to still respect the fact that they're a human being despite how they are. And you may not want to be their best friend. You may not want to hang out with them, have coffee with them. Maybe something would never happen and you don't want ever to happen. But there's still a person who exists in this world that is breathing and is entitled to life as you are. But how do you cope with them? And how, if your thing is you'd like to help them change, you believe that it's your place to perhaps help them change, or that someone should help them change, how would that happen? What would that look like? What can make them change? And what happens when these people are people in power and positions of authority, whether, again, it's your boss at work, or whether it's the head of a country, like what do you do when now these traits can potentially affect policy, can affect, the national outlook, how people look at themselves, how they look at their neighbors, because this person is perhaps preaching. So like, what does that look like? And what do you do with that? Right? So I wanted people to think about that, and to think about that the next time they hear or deal with someone, or maybe someone in your own family is like that, right? Someone who you otherwise love and respect. What happens when they're espousing views like that? What do you do about that? Do you just leave it alone? Do you and I want that to be an impression that was left with the reader. I also wanted to, there's a lot, like I said, not to belabor the point, but I also wanted people to think about what it means to be a person in a position of authority and responsibility, and to, again, like I said, look behind the mask of what are the things that someone like that will have to deal with, especially in the context of someone like an Authren, who, in the context of an ancient ruler, has these things that he has to preserve, culture, traditions, yet in the face of adapting and changing, and appreciate and be empathetic to. And you'll see more as the series goes on that it's somewhat of an impossible position to be in. It's kind of like when we think about CEOs of companies, can you be someone who is completely accountable to shareholders and ethical in every single aspect of the business? What are you going to put forward? Are there going to be times when it's going to come down to shareholders, profitability versus at what we consider ethics or morals, right? You might do something that could harm the environment, but will make you lots of money for the company. What are you going to do about that? Like, these are the situations that are tough and but you hope that people are navigating with a lot of consideration, a lot of skill, but are extremely difficult. Right. So kind of giving some appreciation for people in those positions, and also making them more human, and seeing the rationale, the thought processes behind these decisions, and that there's a flawed human being, and realizing that that person might make a decision that's totally based on their idiosyncrasies, their likes, that have nothing to do with what's good for the company or the kingdom, and that because they're human beings, and that's what happens. So meanwhile, this policy gets enacted, or this rule, this edict gets enacted. And it really has all to do with the fact that they don't like this person, so we're going to make this rule so that and that's what happens. So I wanted to show that, depict that. So that was just some of the things, like I said, without going to all these different things I want to show, but those are some of the big things I want to really, hopefully when you finish the book, when you finish the Drowned Kingdom, you're thinking about, if I were Othran, how would I handle the situations that he's dealing with? And would I be better? Most people would say, "Oh, of course I would be." But then you start thinking, "Well, wait a minute. Maybe I'd have to do that, or maybe I'd have to do that, or maybe I'd have to do that too." So
yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, it goes back to that idea that you'll never know what it's like to be someone until you have to walk a mile in their shoes, right? And
exactly.
We like to judge, we're humans, right? And it's very easy to point at the other guy and say, well, he's not doing that right, and I would do all these. But until we're actually in that position, there's no way of knowing if we would be just as flawed, or if we would swing too far the other way, or, whatever it would be.
Yeah, and I wanted people to understand that, Othran sometimes makes the correct decision, despite all of his issues and his faults and his flaws. Sometimes he makes the correct decision, and he actually has somewhat of a decent capacity to adapt and to change to a certain degree. Not his core self, but other things, more surface things. But some people aren't good at doing that, and he actually is somewhat adept. I do it. He does have a lot of good people surrounding him, but at the same time, he is somewhat adept at doing that, and he does have some admirable traits. They're buried beneath layers of issues and challenges and things that aren't so pleasant. But he does have some admirable traits that the problem is that and again, this is what I said before. Like, what's more important, his admirable traits or the ones that aren't? And how do you parse the two when you're looking at this person who's put in these essentially impossible situations that they have to navigate? If you were the leader of the last survivor of your people, and you had to go to a foreign land and establish yourself, are you going to make all the right decisions, or are you going to get you and your people destroyed? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely the type of person where I jump and then I'm like, maybe I should have thought about that first. So I'm getting better now that I'm a little bit older. But yeah, in my 20s, like because Othran is what?
Yeah, Othran's about 20, and he does a lot of those things too.
Well, that's the other thing, like trying to imagine myself, not just myself, but myself at 20, like trying to lead a large group of people, preserve a culture, go to a new place, set up a new home, like all of the things. And all of these people are looking to you for guidance, and as we just do what he says because he's the king. Technically not yet, but that's a lot.
Yeah, and you will see that as the journey continues, it only gets harder and harder and more complicated, and more things come at Othran that you would ask yourself, "Oh man, I don't think I could make that decision. I don't think I could.
Yeah,
I don't think I could do it. I know I couldn't." Right. And yes, and people forget too that in the kind of more ancient context of lifespans are shorter, that someone who lives to 50, 60, 70 is really, really old. You're an adult by 20, and many people rule kingdoms as preteens in that context. And so he is in a position where he's supposed to be able to make those decisions, right? And so he has to, and he does, and rightly or wrongly, he makes those calls, and you see some of the repercussions now. A lot of them you don't see till later. And with every book, the repercussions and the consequences and what's at stake continues to get much bigger. So, the series seems to be about this, but really it's about something
much bigger,
larger. As you will see, by the time you get to Lion's Pride, which is the book I'm writing now, I think is that watershed book where people go, the light kind of goes on. So I'm looking forward to really getting that out. But as you get through into the last of the Atalantes and Lord of King, you're starting to get inklings of, this is, and then when Lion's Pride drops, you're under no illusions that, there's something much bigger going on here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, Othrin is kind of in a position like the reader where we assume that it's, this little bubble that Othrin is in. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where you go with it because I have questions.
Well, I'm honored. I'm always open to any questions. You can always DM me. And one of the most fun thing about books is when people DM me and say, I think so and so is this. I think they're really doing this or like that. I love that, right? Like I love when people have
Fan
these
theories.
theories and they're like, like I absolutely love that. I talk about stuff for hours with people, like and it's scary because readers are really intelligent, right? Like some people figure out certain things that you feel kind of, and I can't say anything else here, right? And some people are somewhat off base, but that's not because they're not intelligent. It's just that like some of their theories are very plausible, but it's just not what I wrote. So it's really fun to engage in that stuff. And but I can't wait till book 4 when people start going, like I think this is what's gonna like that'll really I think ramp up at book 4 because that's a turning point book. So
yeah. Well, that kind of, I mean, that definitely covers the last question I had for you was where is the series going, which you kind of answered at the beginning with the the 2 7-book arcs and the prequels, but book 3 is coming out in May, pre-order in April, book 4
around the same time, I would say I like to publish one. My goal is to publish one book a year.
Okay.
I try to publish it roughly in spring, and spring, of course, is over the course of 4 months, but somewhere between February and May, June of that year. So if I'm, God willing, if I'm consistent, you will see a book every year coming up for me in that series. So that would mean 2027 would be the last book. But right now we're about to go into, Lord and King, which is coming out in 2023 and in April, early release, and then May for Amazon and the wider England network. And the 4th book, Alliance Pride, you can definitely expect as well in spring of 2024. So that said, I want to quickly address one thing about where I'm going with the series is that not only does the scope of the world expand and the stakes become high and you start to see what's really going on behind the scenes, all those things that perhaps were somewhat vague and ambiguous, as much detail as I put in the book, there's some things that are left very purposely very vague or ambiguous. The magic system, for example, it's very soft, it's very, as that ramps up, you'll see more and more of that, as you've seen a bit of the world, but with every book you'll see a bit more. And what I try to do is, most books tend to focus on one spot, like one country. But then as you go through the books, you see by the time you've seen several different places, you've seen 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 different countries, a lot of those places. The scope of the battles increase. We start off with more, in some cases, skirmishes, in some larger scale, but those battles get bigger and bigger as the series continues, right? And you'll see that right away in the last Atlanteans that there's a lot of fighting.
Well,
right?
The way that you ended it in Drowned Kingdom, I was like, okay, there's some book 2 is going to have some things in it, some much bigger, more intense sequences, I think.
Yeah, I would say that. I'd say that the last Atlanteans so far, I mean, there's one battle in Lord and King that people are rave about, but I think the people usually talk about one right now. The 2 battles is the initial battle in A Drowned Kingdom, which is kind of a duel because people talk a lot about that, and then there's a battle in the last Atlanteans that people really seem to find, that it's something that they think is well written. So, and I'm honored about that. Lord and King also has 2 battles in there that are pretty intense, but that's nothing compared to what's coming in Alliance Pride. The second, third, and the final third of the book are just very chaotic when it comes to battle. So, but anyways, that's the kind of stuff I have planned. So.
I'm excited. I want to make sure, there were a couple comments I wanted to grab before we wrap up. Agreed, Philip.
Oh, the great Philip Chase. I just posted a review of Philip's book, The Way of Eden, that he's just released. It was phenomenal. It is definitely in contention for my book of the year, indie book of the year. It was fantastic. Please check out Philip's book. Available now, all the formats. My reviews on Goodreads, and many, Mark Lawrence for example, has a wonderful review of his book, and Mark Lawrence, one of the people who provided some from cover blurb for his book. Philip's a phenomenal author. Of course, he's one of our beloved booktubers. So go check out his book. But thank you, Philip.
Absolutely. Shout out The Way of Edan.
Yeah.
Yep. That's honestly very true,
you,
Kay.
Kay is wonderful. Check out Kay's channel. He is amazing. Another amazing booktuber.
Chris reads books. He's on my Beanie Barbarians team for the April Readathon in the Keymark Discord. So, hey, Chris.
Oh, wow. Hey,
Chris wants to know, how did you decide to commit to writing in one fantasy world for so many books? I have so many ideas bouncing around in my head, I can't even commit to one of them. That's fair.
Well, that's fair. Well, the thing is, for example, you're going to see, a Drowned Kingdom saga is predominantly set on one continent, but you go to a lot of different countries and kingdoms on this continent. When I go back to the prequel trilogies, a lot of people were like, man, you wrote this tale about Atlantis, and obviously no spoiler, Atlantis sinks, but I really liked it. I'd like to see more of it. And well, when you go back to the prequel trilogies, one of them you get to see, actually both of them, you get to see a lot more of Atlantis the way it existed prior to Othrin's time. And so I get to read about that there. And then and that also focuses on another continent that I talk about in the Drowned Kingdom saga, PATRON land, and get to see a lot of the places there. And then the second series, we expand the universe even more, and you see different parts of so it's easy when you actually get to go within the same universe.
Different places.
You get to go to all these different places. You learn all these different cultures, all these different faiths. So you feel like you're in some ways in different worlds for each book. So, but yeah, that made it easy to do, because a lot of things were going to feel kind of fresh. So.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, and when you put that much work and effort into building a world for your story, it's fun to stay in it and be able to explore all the different parts too. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Shad.
Hey, Shad. Shad's a great guy. Awesome fella.
Your mom has fans in the chat here. We love that.
Yes, thank you, Philip. I told Philip he did ask about my mom, and yeah, she's wonderful. She's wonderful. Oh.
That's very true, Chris.
That's a good point, Chris. Chris is a great booktuber himself. Yep, Chris. I agree. Chris is a great guy. And it's funny that so many people are discovering. We talked about before the broadcast tour. You and I were talking about Malazan, a series that we both admire. Right? You finished. You're a lot farther along. I haven't finished. I'm still reading, but Tolkien. Lord of the Rings. Hobb. Name your Jenny Wirtz. Name your writers. So many people. For Jenny Wirtz, for example, great example. Iconic writer. Came out writing the same time as the Tolkiens and the Jorns, etc. So many people are just discovering Jenny Wirtz for the incredible writer that she is, and that's amazing. But at the same time, it's like, wow, and there's so, because I know, there's moments where I think, man, I'm so poorly read. I haven't read so and so. I see one of you guys put up, oh yeah, I'm reading this. I'm just like, I get FOMO, like, and then I find out like, oh my gosh, like I haven't read that book.
Yep.
Like, and so there's so much that I feel I still need to read, and there's so many things I would like to discover. And I think it's great that there are new people discovering books like that every day. And I'm hoping people continue to discover my series and your series and all the wonderful books out there that people could potentially read. That it's okay if you don't read it now, you might read in 10 years.
Right.
So
exactly. Well, and we're in such a fast-paced community as readers that it can be really tough, because if we had 10 clones of ourselves, it'd be a lot easier to catch up. But like, I'm reading The Blade itself for the first time in April, which I'm very excited about. But I feel like I'm one of the last people on BookTube to get to. I'm so excited. But yeah, but I'm not like, I don't feel like my enjoyment of it is going to be any less coming into the game late. I'm just excited to read it, So if somebody picks up one of our books 10 years from now, like you said, that's just exciting for us, because it means people are still talking about them.
Oh yeah, and sometimes it's not the right time to read a certain book. Some books you have to kind of, whether it's your age, your maturity level, whatever your mood, your frame of mind, it's not the right book for you then, and maybe that's why you haven't picked it up. But when you're ready to read it, a lot of times it is the right time, and it is the right space to do that. And it's been like that for me in writing. I published late. I'm published in my early 50s. It wasn't as much as I lament that, I wish I had written earlier. It's my time now to write. And I'm not writing any sooner or later than I should be writing. The plan from, the person upstairs was right now, published now, not prior. So I'm okay with that. Right. And I'm having a blast. Right. So, Yeah,
Well,
I'm
I
having
I
blast.
mean, if you had published, 10, 20 years ago, would we be sitting here right now? You never know. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I wouldn't pass it up for the world. Sitting here talking
Neither.
with you,
Me
Tori. Yeah,
neither.
I wouldn't pass it up for the world. That is awesome.
Leslie says, "I love those
Oh,
little
the nerdy
romances."
narrative. Another fantastic booktuber.
Everybody subscribe to Leslie. She's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, you
Uh,
still
you
Oh.
Books is still in read.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. I oh. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Philip, and it's booktubers like the nerdy narrative, Leslie, like Philip, like you, Tori. That thank you so much again for what you do for authors. I know you're author yourself, so it's but you understand, right? Like this stuff means the world. Like for someone to actually invite me to speak on their channel about my book, it's so humbling and it means the world. It does so much, for me personally, obviously, but just the chance to get to chat to you is a real honor. So even if we're talking about whatever. So but yeah, I'm very humbled that you want me to come on and talk about Drowned Kingdom, and I hope you enjoyed the book, and I hope you consider reading the second one,
Yeah,
and if you want to just let me know, and I'll send off. And I can't wait to read your book, and yeah, I'm just gonna keep on writing and seeing where it takes me. So
that's awesome. Well, and I think I should definitely point out here that it is a very much a two-way street, for us as booktubers, reaching out to the authors, and it always feels like such a thrill when they're willing to come on and talk on our channel about their books. And so I think it's a really, one of the things I love so much about the community, and we've talked about this before, is just how mutually supportive the community is. The authors and the booktubers, authors to authors, booktubers to booktubers, like whatever the relationship is, that we all enjoy trying to lift each other up and just enjoying the books that we write and read.
yeah, and it's a symbiotic relationship, and it's a relationship that means so much. One that I never knew I would find. One of the nicest surprises about my life, especially in the second half. That this exists, and people go on about the negativity, especially in places in the social media sphere like Twitter and Facebook, and nothing but love, man, nothing but love and good vibes for the writing community, the bloggers, the booktubers, the authors, the agents, the editors, the people in our space, poets. They're all just phenomenal. Like there's so little drama or issues. It's just a great place to be. That I'm just really, really loving it. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
completely agree. Chris, that's a yes.
Well,
George said it.
Jordan, another great
Also George.
blogger. Escapist book tours. Him and Justin Gross, amazing guy. Yeah, I'm so grateful to people like Jordan who've read the series and enjoyed it. He's read. I sent him an arc of Lord and King. I'm happy
Nice.
that he enjoyed it and posted a review. So he's read all three. He's probably one of the few people that's read all three books, and I'm honored
He's a
that
super fan.
I'm very honored that someone that I respect that much, has been enjoying my books. So, thank you, Jordan, for all your support.
Mike Molman wants to know, when will book 2 be out in audiobook?
That's something we're still kind of working on it. Yeah, I don't want to say too much yet because, frankly, making an audiobook, I mean, depending how you make it, there's all kinds of ways to make it, but it can be expensive and really time consuming. And you also, for me, like, the audiobook for Drowned Kingdom, I'm not an audiobook listener, but obviously I had to listen to mine, and there was a whole process of auditioning, getting actors, and all these things that making an audiobook is hard. And hats off to all the audiobook narrators out there. Like I've tried to do like 2-second verbs reading my book, and I've fumbled over and had to do 6 retakes. Like, hats off to those voice actors. Anyways, yeah. So my audiobook, which had two fantastic. I have two audiobook narrators in my book, right? And one voices mostly the voice of PATRON and all of the Atalanteans, very snooty, very snarky, polished, highbrow kind of a British accent that actor does. And then one voices most of the Eltonish people and does a great job with both of them. Adam Curtin and Sean Polite are the two voice actors, and there's a lot of work that goes into making an audiobook. And even if you're doing it yourself. So I'm not sure yet. I don't have a definitive date on that, but it's something that's definitely, on the docket. So, but if you, and I understand a lot of people like to consume or can only consume audiobooks now. So, and I respect that. Yeah, I would love to say, oh yeah, it's coming right away, but there's a lot that goes into that. So more of a bigger endeavor. My main goal is to get all of the books out in ebook and physical book form, and then kind of focus on audiobooks and things like that, later on. So right now I'm just furiously trying to get those books written, and then we're to go back and strategize about how to do things like audiobooks for the entire series.
Yeah. I did want to shout out, by the way, everyone, Jord has a booktube channel now, so click on the middle of nowhere tag and
no, I can't believe I didn't. I gotta go to subscribe, man.
Well, he just put it out like.
Oh, congratulations, Jord! That's awesome. Oh yeah, that's gonna be awesome. Congratulations,
yes.
Jord. Good for you, man. I can't wait to watch your content. It's gonna be amazing.
Let's see. Taylor wants to know.
Do you find my peeps?
Also, shout out.
Big shout out. Taylor made the Between the Pages. Fabulous person. One of the best people I've met anywhere. Her channel, check out. I think I just saw she put up another her vlog videos. Like
are so good.
Japan. Like I could sit and watch those for hours, man. They're amazing. She's one of the co-hosts for Page Chewing. A lot of the episodes are on her channel. So big shout out to Taylor, an assistant that I was before I go blog. Just a wonderful person and someone who I'm very fortunate to call friend. So her question. Okay, so do you find writing an unreliable narrator to be more challenging or fun as your role expands? It is fun, but it's also fun as Taylor, I'm not sure if you saw this part, that as I continue to introduce different first-person perspectives, a couple of third-person, omnipotent, chapters sprinkled in there, it's really fun that I get to play with all that because, like I said, purposely, you want to keep the reader kind of with this unreliable narrator who doesn't know everything and doesn't see everything, and then as you as a reader see things that he doesn't see, and you get to learn, oh, that's what's going on with that. I think it just enhances kind of the mystery and suspense of the whole thing as the covers slowly pull back and you really start to see what's going on. So it is fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for that excellent question.
Okay. Well, there are also Troy just started Janny Wirtz this year.
Oh,
I know Andrew Wizard read his first Janny Wirtz fairly recently too, I believe.
Yeah, he loved it. I think he's on book 2 of that
Cycle
trilogy,
of
Cycle of Fire, yeah. And he's loving it. So I think hopefully he's going to tackle her main series, which is the Words of Light and Shadow. It is my number 1 fantasy series of all time. It is just, it's right up there to me. I mean, for most people, you talk about Malazans, the Wheel of Times, the Realm of the Eldlings. Like, if you're reading those, you should be reading Janny. It's yeah, Troy. I hope you enjoy it. It's fantastic. Yeah, maybe depending on where you are, maybe if you like Janny, keep reading. I think you will. It's very immersive. That we'll do some buddy reads together, something at some point. So because there's a lot of Janny I haven't read yet. So
yeah, I have not read Janny yet. I am. Oh, she is on my TBR. I'm going to.
Just wait. It's gonna blow you away.
I'm so glad, Taylor. Yeah, a couple people have said, hey, I just read it or haven't read it yet either. Yep, Jord. So I'm
Abercrombie glad. I haven't read this. I have it on my shelf. I have the Age of Madness trilogy on my shelf. I haven't read it yet. The original trilogy is pretty well. It's one of my top fantasy trilogies of all time, and it certainly has one of my all-time favorite characters, Sandan Glokta. He is a character for the ages. So
I'm so excited.
Very character driven.
Well, that was what was funny is so many people pitched it to me like, well, just know that the plot, like, there isn't a ton of plot. It's just very, and I'm like, I'm not going to complain about that. Like, I am such a character nerd. It'll be fine.
Yeah, very good. But lots of his battle scenes are, battle scenes. Oh, Joe Abercrombie.
His Shattered Sea trilogy last year, and his writing style immediately. I was like, yep, I'm definitely going to jive with this. I'm pretty sure.
I haven't read that yet. I have to get it. It's another one that's on my TBR. It's just getting to me. Yeah, he's in and his dark humor, his snarky humor is just so. But it's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great writer, brilliant writer.
There you go. Troy's ready for a Janny Wirtz buddy read.
Oh yeah, anytime, bro. Yeah, we'll get that down at some point for sure. Yeah, I'd be honored to.
Taylor's looking forward to the Drowned Kingdom reveals.
It's definitely coming, Taylor. Just wait till as you get into Lord King and especially Lion's Pride. Oh yeah, you're gonna see.
I'm guessing you're definitely similar, but when you have, as the author, all the things in the series, and it's almost like an energy that builds up in you that you're just like, I want other people to read this so bad because I can't say anything.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I can't say anything, but
say anything.
It's amazing. It's funny. Speaking of Jenny Wirtz, so she's she's a exceptionally smart person, and she has decades in the business, right? And she's written all these incredible series, and she always says to me, it's hard for someone to get things by me, for me not to pick up on X and figure it. And she has figured some stuff out that is scary. But I'm like, oh, I can't even say anything, but wow, like I'm just blown away by stuff that she has, But I can't wait for someone like her who has read all 3 books, and I know she's waiting for book 4, and that when she reads it, I'm hoping she's going to go, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. That's what I'm praying that, that I can get that reaction of someone like Jenny. So, and I'm honored to have her be one of the people she has the front cover blurb endorsement on Lord King. To have an honor of Jenny's caliber, like your reading, be behind your work, like your books, be willing to write a blurb for the front cover. I'm just so I'm so blown away because she is an iconic writer, and the other 3 writers that have also done so, again, all dear friends of mine, Eve Kogush, multi-award winning author, Neglected Merge series, Tim Hardy and Holly Tinsley, both SPFBO 7 finalists. Again, superb authors, and dear friends. To have those kind of people behind you to write these blurbs about your work is just, it's a real privilege. So I'm very honored to have that on the cover of Lord and King. So
that's awesome. Well, PL, thank you so much for generously spending your time on my channel this evening. I'm so glad that we were able to have a chat and to talk about the book, and I'm sure I'm going to have lots of questions that I'll be DMing you later, spoiler filled.
It's all good.
But yeah, thank you so much for being on the channel. I really appreciate it.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Tori. It's my privilege to be there. Thank you for taking a chance on A Drowned Kingdom, and I hope you enjoy it. And again, hopefully you'll be willing to, read the next few books. And again, I'm happy to provide that for you. And and again, it's been great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, PL. All right, guys, thank you for being here in the chat. Thank you for all of your questions. Really appreciate that. Chris, thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks, buddy. You're amazing.
You guys are all awesome, and you make these live streams so much more fun because we get to have a much bigger audience we can all talk to. It's really fun. So, yeah. All right, we'll see you guys in the next video.